Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Psych Crusader once again. So today I have with me a special guest, Jen. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
I'm glad you're here. We were just chatting before we started, and I'm pretty excited about this show and the direction that it can go. And hopefully we'll get a chance to, maybe bring some awareness to some people that could use some awareness and maybe a little bit of direction. So for disclosures, I pull all my information from the Mayo Clinic. So if you don't like it, go sue them. I have to start off like that. You have to give a disclaimer.
Absolutely.
So also, if you like the show, like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that good stuff. It helps the channel grow. And this segment of my podcasting is growing faster than the other. So that excites me that I'm getting more and more followers and watchers. So that's exciting. So today we're going to cover borderline personality disorder. So this one kind of has a little special place with me. And I think it has a special place with you too as well, Jen. So this, I think we're going to bring some real situations to the table today. And I think that hopefully this is going to be beneficial to someone. I don't do this to get paid. I do this to bring awareness in order to help people. So let's dig in. So personality disorder is obviously a mental condition. Everybody knows that. It affects the way that people feel about themselves and others. So you're looking at yourself a certain way, you're looking at other people a certain way. So we have all these, different angles to look at here. And it makes it hard for you to function in everyday life. It's extremely difficult. And we're going to get into those reasons why here in a little bit, and then it'll make a lot more sense to everybody. It includes, you have unstable relationships, unstable thought patterns. You're going to be impulsive sometimes. And, it's just an unhealthy way to see yourself and potentially see others. So there's a lot going on with borderline personality disorder. Jen, do you have anything that you want to bring to the table with that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I, try to explain to people is with borderline personality disorder, it is not a chemical imbalance. It's not something that you're born with.
Right.
It is based on a level of trauma or things that have happened in your life, to where it usually goes with PTSD. Usually there's been a traumatic event that's happened that your brain cannot process.
Right.
Therefore, yeah. And so when you talk about, impulsivity or, failure to be able to have healthy relationships, things like that, is because of the characteristics that, come from BPD, whether it's fear of abandonment, fear of people, fear of being left, a people pleasers, codependence. I mean, the reason in which they have unhealthy relationships and things like that is due to instability in the family and really just trying to find a safe place. And I think a lot of people, of borderlines, if you were to ask them, the two things that they feel like they need is that they do not feel safe and they have been viewed or described as defective.
Right.
So you start to question your own reality. And so it's very easy for those people to take on a lot of blame and not really be able to address what causes it. We just stick with the behaviors of, and not so much why did it happen and how can we fix it?
Right. I 100% agree with you, and you couldn't, there's no better way it could have been said. But I also like that that is how we tend to look at the behavior, but we don't look at the whys and the hows and the what can we do. So that is something we do on this show, is we do look into that a little bit, say, why do these things happen? And you brought up a lot of really good points that, I don't want to sound like a meteorologist or anything, but, you have basically your like inner atmospheric conditions. You're affected by, triggers happen, or you've gone through, like you said, the traumas that trigger these things. And then you might not realize it in the moment, but over a period of time, you're going to have these increased situations, and then you're going to have to go backtrack when you're really looking at it and go, where did this start? How did this happen? And
the older you get, I think the worse, the more you can see it. When you're younger,
right.
You know, a lot of kids have issues with impulsivity. A lot of kids, you know, but the promiscuity is something I think that, you know, I think with that situation, why more of what has happened, like therapy, you know, DBT, like different scenarios where they can see, you know, this is what caused this, because they get labeled a lot of times like they're promiscuous, you know, and a lot of, from my experience and the people that I worked with, when you're abused growing up sexually or whatever, your brain that's what it becomes good for. And so that is your idea of love. And so with people that are having BPD or mental illness start to develop, that is how they got positive attention. That is, you know, you know, it's a big thing if someone's that a statistic, not really, but a common thing is that a lot of people with borderline have been assaulted in some way, usually sexually is a big component of it. Therefore, that becomes their love language, you know, because that has been where they've had an intimacy that goes a little bit deeper than people with borderlines. A lot of time have a hard time connecting because of the fact the way the brain associates is love will become sexual, or love will become whatever gives them a rush, and the brain doesn't distinguish this is healthy, this is not. It's just a feeling that you get, and it kind of it runs off of each other. So I think that's a big thing about it, is you'll see symptoms but not the cause.
Right. So your neurotransmitters aren't quite firing on all cylinders, basically. You've altered them somehow. The trauma that you experienced altered your neurotransmitters. So that makes a ton of sense. And so you brought up the early ages. Now, for me as a father of 3 daughters, I always, so you know how it is in the teenage years, you have all these hormones and everything going on. And as a parent, and you're looking at this and you're going, well, my kids are going through all this stuff. It's easy to just discard that and say, this is just 3 teenage daughters going through hormonal changes because they're transitioning into adult women. And so you don't think about it like that. Like I never thought that they had mental disorders or anything. I mean, they did, for the most part, they don't. But if I was to look at it in a different way, I probably would have paid way more attention to their behaviors. Just simply because now I'm going, well, maybe I missed something. And that could have been detrimental. And so
it has those earlier discussions. You know, a lot of times people don't want to have discussions with their kids. They say, oh, they're going through depression, or they're going through this. And that's why there's such a large statistic of kids that are being abused in one way or another. And you know, it's the longer it goes on, the likelihood that your personality will disassociate, you know, because it's the brain trying to survive. So at some point it has to shut off. You know, you're oversensory at that point. And that's why,
absolutely,
you know, triggers are so hard with people with PTSD, because it can be something as similar as small as a smell, a tone of voice, you know, there's so many different things, and you can't control your environment. And so some of the reason why medicines are so important is because of the sensory overload. You know, to sit yourself down.
And in the younger years, you know, in your 9th grade to 12th grade, as a you know, a pre-adult, you are going to experience some sensory overload. It's going to happen. Especially if you're active in things, you know. I had that problem in school because I had to play football. I had to try to pull good grades. I had a peer group that I was always trying to impress all the time. So I had all these standards that I felt like I had to live up to all the time. And it caused me a sensory overload. So on the weekends, all I wanted to do was get drunk. And that ended up causing another problem in my life. So I tried to solve a problem with another problem that created more problems. So
because it's a void, you know. I think, like, for me, when you talk about high school, for me, you know, 7th grade, you know, due to abuse in the home, I was in foster care. I came back right before freshman year, so I had been away from my friends all that time, and then was assaulted by, the quarterback of the football team. And
Right.
that was the projection of the way the rest of high school went for me.
Right.
So, I was emancipated by 16 and a half, and I went a whole different direction because one thing about BPD, a lot of people don't understand is you don't trust authority. You don't trust anybody because there's never been somebody reliable that you can trust. So that is why getting on it is important. Therapy is important. Like just being able to talk out your feelings, especially when you're younger,
Right.
can help a lot, especially kids that are in foster care. There's just not enough wraparound services in our mental health facilities here in Fort Wayne, or I don't know all the other counties, but they have very small follow
Right.
through.
And you're right. They do have the follow through is just not there, or it's very little. And I think that's probably because there's just not enough mental health professionals to keep up with the amount of need that there is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we can get some of these college kids to get in the psychology field and and start to
We
really
got to
pump our
make more. I mean, that's the biggest thing,
yeah, gotta make
like I
more.
worked in mental health for a long time. And the thing is about it is a lot of the people that are working at your Bones or your Park Centers, they are putting themselves through school. So the turnover
Right,
rate is very high, and
right,
so I've found a lot of times right now in our younger generation, they're making the appointments. The parents are seeing what's going on. They see maybe medications can help, and then the therapist cancels every month.
right.
Or,
And I think
there's so many
yeah,
aspects missing school and only putting it during school time. So wraparound services and the community school, like guidance counselors really coming around and doing a wraparound care, is going to be crucial with things that do happen in the younger years, really do set the stage,
yeah,
and how soon you address it is going to be how long it takes it with you. Because like you said, it's not until you can see that your behavior is so really a lot different than the way other people are
yep,
is when you can start to see that you are different. It's not going to be anybody saying you do this and that. It's when I look at myself in a situation, I say, oh, well, not every other 41-year-old is crying and flipping out because of this. They can
right,
handle it this way, as to where I want to like go hide somewhere and I cry. I go very much to my emotions in times of fear, as to where I think people that don't have this mental diagnosis can calmly, age appropriately handle times of big stress.
right. That makes a lot of sense. I think that when we really get honest about things, and like you said, like you had a comparable, so you could look at other people in your age group and say, well, that's huge. That's huge to be able to look at your own peer group and go, well, how are they? We're all kind of going through kind of similar things in our life cycle. So how are they handling it? Well, they're handling it much better than me, so maybe I need a little bit of help. and
Yeah,
and we have to, and I do this all the time, that just because you have to ask for help, it doesn't make you weak, and it doesn't make you
absolutely.
a lesser person.
Mhm.
Sometimes something just doesn't make sense for you, and you just need someone to look at it from a different angle than what you're seeing it as,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
go in and kind of untangle it for you.
And explain it. Like for
Right,
me, a big thing people can consider my behavior. Like if I know I'm right, I'm right. Like I
right,
will, everything is black and white with me. I'm starting, and
right,
that is a big thing with BPD is things are black and white. It's either right or wrong. You're either my best friend or my worst enemy. There really struggles to be an in between with that. And so in your jobs, like at least for me, because I worked hard to become educated and have degrees, like
right,
it really is hard when your emotions don't reflect your intelligence, where, because that's the biggest thing. I've been in years of therapy, medications. The biggest issue I still struggle with today is in a moment, I cannot process my emotions the same as other people. I
right,
know, like my boss says, you're being aggressive. That is the takeaway term where I've heard a lot of people with BPD be called is you're aggressive. Your tone is different. Where, other people can calmly talk, my emotions are getting, and before you know it, like
yeah,
I'm just going a mile a minute. And that's the hardest part. You can be self-aware, you can see where your differences are, but a lot of times with BPD, even people that are aware, it's really hard in the moment to see that you're really going over the top.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that. I will let it's like a volcano erupting, and I don't realize it's going on, but everybody around me is like, whoa, time to evacuate.
Yeah. And if you don't trust someone to talk to, you'll never see that you're inappropriate.
Right.
Like if I don't reach out for help and go to, like, I have a therapist, I have a mentor, I'm honest with my doctors. Like there's things to where I need to be told if I'm acting out of line. I have a coworker, I sit by her at big meetings so she can tap my leg if I'm starting to display the
Right,
negative
absolutely.
aspects, because we're passionate people. We are passionate. We believe in what we believe,
Yep.
but it doesn't mean we always express it appropriately. So I
Right.
have to put myself around people that I know will help keep me in line if I don't see it coming. And then I've also got, when you hold yourself accountable, the feedback's better. Like my boss knows, hey, Jen's a passionate person, but when I'm wrong, I accept that I'm wrong. I accept the consequences and I try to make it right. And I try not to do that again. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, because PTSD is not something that you can control.
Right.
It's just about having good grounding techniques. So
Absolutely. So one of the symptoms that you brought up was abandonment. And I know that for me is one of the largest ones. I can't stand to be left or abandoned or to be by myself in relationships. I can't stand it. After my divorce and I had this empty house to myself, it drove me insane. Like I was literally a basket case in my own house because I didn't have the person that I put my stress and like in the hand, I put it in the basket and say, okay, I'm at home with my comfort person, and now everything's fine. I didn't have that. So I'm constantly would look around the house looking for comfort somewhere, and I just could never find it. And I really struggled with that abandonment issue.
it's a big thing in needing that validation. Like validation is a big thing for people with borderline, because basically something has happened to where you're unsure of your environment and you're trying to look for other people to let you know that it's safe. Like
Yeah.
one of the biggest things I think that I had to learn in therapy, and I took it the hardest, was no one is going to save you.
No.
And it hit me so hard, but I took a year and I didn't date, and I did all, and I just learned. And now, within the past year, I've went to Paris by myself, England, like I've taken, I've been everywhere, and to sit there and think that I would ever in my life, being so codependent, would get to a point where I can get on an international flight by myself. I can get on the States by myself. I know no matter where I'm at, I trust myself more than anybody else. And because I've learned to trust myself, I know that I'm in control of my environment and my surroundings. And as long as I make the best choices I can avoid to put myself in those situations again. And so for me, that is the biggest component of BPD, is you've got to get your power back. Like you cannot sit there for the rest of your life and think that other people's voices, whatever their behavior is going to dictate my response.
Right.
And that is really maturing, is your behavior is not going to dictate my response.
Right. So for you, how long did it take you to get to that point?
Well, I had to put down substances. Like drinking was a big thing that took over my life. Right. Substances became a big thing for me young. So while people in high school, I was already on harder drugs.
Right.
It wasn't like I wasn't drinking with, I was, but after so many things had happened by junior year, I had been in trouble. So to call me an alcoholic, I didn't care. My thing was like, well, live the life I live and tell me if you wouldn't drink, or
Right.
well, at least I'm not doing harder stuff. Be happy with this. And, it got to the point I was so sick and there's all different ranges, and I don't know how far you go into it, but I mean, with ideations, intrusive thoughts, it becomes a really sick thing if you don't
Right.
get help, if you isolate,
Right.
if all of a sudden your brain can be your worst enemy. And
Yeah. Oh,
so
absolutely.
once I
That's an
started
that's an
getting rid,
understatement, I think.
yeah, once I decided, I was going to address the drinking issue, like I was really, because the way in anything is there's a hole inside of us. And until we can figure out, self-love and how to, know what we need, then you won't be able to address it. So it's taken me 5 years of consistent work, and that's weekly work, either with a therapist, with a
Right.
mentor, sponsor, whoever you want to call it. And then I also believe, being in the field I do, because I'm in recovery, I sponsor other women. I use a big book. I do meditations. I pray every day. I try to tell myself, if I can use my story to help one other person, my story becomes worth it. The things
Right.
that I went through no longer are the boogeyman. It's actually one of my biggest gifts. So, I've had to learn at it that way. I'm not going to, be ashamed my whole life anymore, because, you get told you're crazy so many times.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
You're ashamed of it. It's a big stigma to have BPD, but on the other side of it, I've learned the attributes of it. We're extremely, passionate people. We are, natural caregivers. We
Right.
put other people's needs, and if it's healthy, because you can jump on the other side and be extremely codependent and think that you can
Oh, yeah.
fix everybody, and your self-worth is dependent on what other people think of you. So I think it's a lifelong process, but I think the biggest thing that propelled my healing was when I stripped everything away. Like, I took a year to myself. I didn't date. I made a list of the things that I wanted, because impulsivity is a hard thing with people with BPD. So,
Right.
serial relationship people, and false sense of love, false sense of a lot of those things. You're wanting to believe so much what someone says to you that you have rose colored glasses on,
Yeah.
or you run away so quickly because you don't know how to verbalize conflict. You don't know how to talk it out. So to me, it's when you don't have anybody to basically either tear down your, however you want to say, your house, but they also can't build it up on on
Yeah.
falsities.
Yeah.
Because, some people will just say, oh, you're the amazing. And that's not true. You're not doing amazing things. You're doing very hurtful things. So you have to put
Right.
yourself around people that can call you out. Because, another big thing with borderlines is can manipulate people very well, because you can read a room really well.
Unfortunately, yes.
So there's good thing, but used in the right way, I can pick up to nonverbal cues. I know how to make people feel like it's a safe place. I know how to engage with people because I am sensitive to those things. So used in a healthy way, I'm able to affect people in a very healthy way, because I don't know, my whole life people have said it's so easy to talk to you. And I think it's that, because I give out that, no judgment. I like
Right.
you either way. I don't make people uncomfortable. So in the right context, BPD has a lot of like great personality traits that other people don't have. I mean, to be honest, if you're healthy about it.
I highly agree. That it's all that information is fantastic. Um, it I felt like I was listening to the thoughts that I've had it myself. But one that I want to add is paranoia. So I became, so like you said, like your mind is your enemy when you're in the middle of an issue, and or the so I had to get my mind to stop trying to manipulate, going crazy with thoughts.
Mhm.
And so I just worked myself almost to death. Is work, 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 work. 14, 15, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
Just keep working, because if I stop working, I'm going to go crazy. And so, but then I started to weaken my body. And then I wasn't strong enough to, physically deal with me mentally. And so it turned into this big whole negative thing. And so I had to sit down one day and go, okay, I'm not taking care of myself on any fronts right now. What do I need to do to take a step in a positive direction? And so I just kind of came up with a game plan and said, you know what, just masking the paranoia is not helping. And it's still there. You're just like turning the radio up on it. So
yeah. And my therapist told me, because a lot of people, bipolar, borderlines, very much paranoid about not fitting in, or because for me at least, I already can tell that I'm different than my peers. Then in times that it's really highlighted, now I feel even worse because I see that not everybody responds the same as me. But on the other side of it, there's the control part, because my sponsor and therapist people have told me you're not that important. And so once I could really tell myself you're not that important, nobody's staring at you. Like how are you the forefront of someone's mind? And so when I can tell myself, like, you're not the star of the show, like no one is really giving two craps about you, because I think I'm the center of attention and I want everybody to look at me. So when I can remind myself, they're probably not talking about you. And if they are, oh, well, like if you can just not put your self-worth into other people, then it doesn't matter if they liked me or not, because I like myself. So, it's the self-preservation we have to let go. And I don't know if anybody has talked to you about, have you looked in any research on EMDR?
No.
Okay. So it's something that they are saying can almost cure borderline BPD. And this is not off the Mayo Clinic, but you can look it up. And EMDR is a big thing. And it's eye movement. What is it? So basically, you know how the pendulum, there was a doctor who did a study, and your body processes memories in REM sleep. So EMDR is through eye movement and grounding techniques, where basically it can process your PTSD that stays in your amygdala, and it processes it through a REM cycle, and says that you can process your memory, your PTSD memories. And according to what I have been told and the people I've worked with, can cure the symptoms of BPD, if you will, because the triggers won't be there anymore. So now you're just dealing with the behavior, but without the emotions, which kind of is the healing part of BPD, is to be able to process times in which they happen, as well as not have your emotions attached to those memories or situations. So if anybody has not heard of it, I highly recommend it. You have to be specially licensed to do it. So not every therapist can do it, but I've seen great results even with people in recovery. They use it in a lot of different places and has been known to help a lot. Did you freeze? All right. I can see you now.
I think it may have started glitching.
It did.
Okay. That's good. That's good. All right. So go ahead and continue with what you were just talking about.
Oh, well, basically with EMDR, I would follow up, and there's plenty of doctor or therapists that do it, but they do need to have a special licensing for EMDR. But from the research I've done and the people that I've worked with, and it is the closest they know to heal from BPD or PTSD, because your trauma is in your frontal lobe. And so through EMDR, it gets you in your REM cycle. and it's able to process the memories, which then gets it out of your frontal lobe into the time in which it happened. And so the emotions aren't triggered all the time. So you can go into situations and talk about something without completely not being able to process the situation. So let's say someone who is had a lot of sexual trauma and maybe they cannot have a normal relationship or intimate life, because of the things that have happened. Well, they can go through EMDR, and it's basically you create a safe spot, if you will, and it's a container, and you put memories into these containers, and one by one you can process the memories. So it helps get it, I guess, from the frontal lobe. I don't know how else to explain it. I'm sorry, my alarm is going off. Do you want to ask the next question while I get this real quick? I'm sorry, I don't know if it's picking up on your end.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start moving.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just don't want it to keep going off while we're.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
So sorry. So, but yeah, I would just say I'd follow up with people if anybody's interested in EMDR, because it is a breakthrough over the last couple of years, and it's becoming more and more popular with people trying to deal with PTSD and BPD.
Right. Yeah, I was just kind of, as you were explaining it, I was kind of reading up on it a little bit. It does make sense. I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense. I was starting to read it. I'm gonna have to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah, even the grounding techniques, that's the biggest thing with BPD, and I think that's why it does work very well, is it's able to keep you in the present moment. When you can learn grounding, whether it's counting, tapping, a lot of those things that can keep you from disassociating, because you're able to stay present. You're able to, really keep yourself from going too big into the impulsive, behaviors or panic attacks,
Right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely going to look into that a little bit further. So one of the big issues is people start to have, when they don't know how to deal with it or face BPD, so the suicide thoughts start happening. And so I want to be real clear that when you start thinking this way, I know a lot of times people will nudge and they'll give hints, and you have to remember that it's not that people don't want to help you. They are consumed in their own life and they miss the signs. Mm-hmm. Generally, 99% of the times, someone has missed the sign. And so for those of you who have those thoughts, I really, really urge you to utilize crisis lines, because they are not going to miss your signs. And I think those are going to be very important. Or just schedule a therapy session. Just call in and say, I need to talk to somebody like ASAP, and they'll get you set up.
We also have SOS. We have SOS here in Allen County. So, instead of calling the police, you can call, the non-emergency police line, and they have what they call SOS workers. And if you're unsure if maybe you should go into a mental health facility, like if you're just in a triggered state or acute state, if you will, they have people that will come to your house free of charge and sit there with you as long as you want and come up with some sort of plan for you. It's not a 48-hour or 24-hour hold. It's a team, though, that will come sit with you and come up with a plan, and it's free. So if you, don't have a therapist, or your therapist cancels, or you're in a crisis and you don't, maybe want to go to the hospital and sit and wait, 8 to 10 hours before you might get to talk to somebody, you can call the non-emergency police line and say, hey, I need somebody from SOS to come sit with me. So, that's something I always tell people. I don't think a lot of people know it as much as they should, even with your family, if you have a loved one that is acting out and the police want to say, this is behavioral, You can ask for a SOS and say, no, this is a mental issue, whether like when you said suicide,
Right.
things like that. They can come talk this out with you so you can come up with a plan without getting put on a hold unless
Yep.
you need a hold, but there's so many more resources that people are, willing, and we have the resources to come sit at our house if if you truly just don't know what to do.
Right.
So
I did not know that Allen County had a program like that, and that sounds like something that a lot of counties need to have.
but they don't advertise it, and I only know that personally from mental health that affects my family. And they would say, do you want so and so arrested or whatever? And then I found out from a school that said, hey, there's an SOS team, so before your teenager gets arrested for acting out and this and that, we can have somebody come over and do an assessment on the mental health, because too many times teenagers are threatened and arrested and put down a whole behavioral route when
Right.
it's not. It's an emotional deficiency. I mean, BPD is one of those where the behavior doesn't make sense to a lot of people, because what they don't understand is, okay, this is one situation. Well, somebody with BPD, that reminds them of this thing, which reminds them of this thing. And before you know it, you're talking 10 years in the past. And because that's how compartmentalized BPD brains work, everything is a
Yeah.
compartment, so that's why PTSD is so big with people with BPD, is because one thought leads to another thing, and it opens up a whole, plethora of things that remind them of that. So, I can only say, like, if you have family members or things that, are going through it, asking for help, like you said, is really hard. Just saying, hey, if you need anything, I found that with my family and mental health issues, like just knowing that somebody's there, and knowing
Right.
also with BPD that sometimes you feel like you're straight to suicide, and you have to learn how to gauge that, because people with BPD will be like, I'm suicidal. Well, as you start to process your emotions, it's hopeless. I don't really want to kill myself, but that's the best way I can explain it. Like, people with
Right.
BPD run on like three emotions. Well, there's a whole emotion wheel, but unfortunately, anger, comes from being hurt. Being scared comes out in anger. Anger is pretty much, a big behavior, or of people with BPD. Like, they just seem like they are highly irritated people. And I think, that's one of the things that I have to hold myself accountable with, is the way that my behavior makes others feel. It's not all about me and how I feel.
Right.
If three people tell you you're inappropriate in your behavior, then my brain telling me that they're wrong does not matter. There's three other people here
Yeah.
that tell me that I've played a part in the way I've made them feel. And so I have to tell myself my emotions and my thinking a lot of times are distorted. So being able to learn to trust people because I can advocate for myself helps me stay in reality. It's easy for us to get stuck in delusion because our narrative can fit right into that.
That's absolutely correct. I get stuck in that sometimes myself, where no one's going to tell me anything different. I'm like, I have the power, you don't. And
Mhm,
in my mind, that's what I'm thinking.
mhm.
But in reality, I'm wrong,
Yeah,
and I'm not ready to accept that in
absolutely.
that
And I think,
moment.
like you said, that's why therapy, like, I think with people with mental health, even if it's not every week, I think I see mine every 2 months now, or as needed, but BPD is one of those that I truly think having somebody to call you out on your crap is very
Oh yeah.
crucial, to hold yourself to a standard, to be able to reflect about your day, see where you've done wrong. And because it's very easy, at least for me, my BPD I can make someone feel like the worst piece of crap, or I can make them feel like the best. It's how I use my words, so I've had to learn, even
Right.
though I'm intelligent, is it better to be right or to get along? And I've had to learn that even though I want to show you that I'm right and I'm better than you, I'm going to stick with the fact that it's more important to get along and to be a healthy person to be around. Because if I don't, I'm an extremely toxic person to be around.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes your conviction to be superior is the problem, and you don't realize it in the moment because you're just counterpointing everything all the time.
You're
So
just
you
trying to
can
make it feel good enough, you know? I mean,
right.
I think that's the big thing with BPD is people have taken away your choices in life with trauma, and now you felt like you spent the rest of your life trying to fight and dig your way out of a hole. So it's hard to
Oh yeah.
look at anything as just normal. It's like everything's rushed. It has to happen right now. It's the biggest deal in the world. I'm going to die if it doesn't get, taken care of right now, because you can't move past it, and things take time. And so that's one of those things I feel that a lot of people don't understand is that we all have a certain part of unhealthiness in us. I mean, nobody has none, but
Right.
how do we work together and just love each other, like in spite of our flaws? And how do we work together, especially in the community, to raise awareness about it? And I think Alan, there are more therapists, but you'll have to go outside your area. I always tell people it takes a couple months before you can really see if a therapist is going to work for you. Especially I think with people with BPD, because it's very easy if you say one thing that I don't like, all of a sudden I don't trust you and I don't want anything to do with you. And
Right.
so we look for people to fail us. Like, that's something where I had to be alone to see that I look for reasons for people to disappoint me. Like I'm waiting on it, and so it's like living life waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you make everybody else uncomfortable, because if I'm not aware, I have very negative thinking, and I treat people like they never do things that are good enough, because that's the way I treat myself, and so really having people to run things by, is to me is what I found to be the most crucial part of my healing, is that I can talk to somebody about my day and they can be like, Jen, you use that as a scapegoat. You 100% manipulated that situation to get what you want. And I learned, because I trust people today, and undiagnosed or untreated BPD, you don't trust anybody because you don't see any type of outlet in sight. You just, it's a horrible way to live. It's a horrible, um, I would suggest anybody, even if they think that they show some of these signs, don't diagnose yourself. Don't let other people diagnose you. Like go and get a therapist, get somebody, talk about, how you're feeling, and let them see, because it's very nuanced, and you can fit all different categories when it comes to mental health. I mean, BPD almost falls in all of the DSMs. It's one of those that you can fit into a lot of different ones.
So, one thing that I was kind of thinking about is, not when you brought up to have that one person that's going to hold you accountable and call you out. I'm lucky that I do have that person, and that's basically their job of their everyday. They get paid to do this. Like basically, when I start to go down this deep end, and she reels me in and says, "Hey, you're being stupid. Like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to take your issues out on everybody else when it's your issue." And so I'm fortunate to have that, but not everybody does. So I do encourage people that if you have people in your life that do that are capable of, knowing you that well to know when you're starting to kind of move in this certain direction that they know is going to be a negative direction for you and people around you, that's having that person is going to be highly beneficial. Because one thing that when we look at some of the other shows that I had, in the beginning, when we talked about, like clinical depression and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and ADHD, those are all, they're bad in their own right. But most of them can be treated. I mean, I know, like schizophrenia is a kind of a scary thing because you jump in and out of reality all the time. With bipolar disorder, you're just going through this wave of instability. With depression, it can come, it can go, it can come, it can go. And so they all have their own little characteristic that, you really have to look at. But what I want to say with borderline personality disorder is this disorder can take you in very dark, dark places. And so I want people to, if you're feeling like you fit some of the mold of what Jen has talked about and some of the things that we've talked about on the show, I need you, if you're not ready to seek treatment, please pay attention to what is going on around you in your mind, the thoughts you're thinking, write in journals so that way you don't forget. I keep stuff around me all the time that way. If I need to jot something down, a feeling or a thought that I need to come back and think about and do later, that I'll at least remember to do it. I'm not saying that that's the greatest technique in the world because who really carries.
And take advantage of technology. On social media, I follow BPD support groups, because I can put things in that group and they do understand. Another thing that I utilize, because insurance at different times was harder to afford, therapy and stuff, with copays, and anymore there's a support group for everything. So I've been to Codependence Anonymous, Al-Anon, adult children of dysfunctional families. There is about a group for everything. And for me, that's where I truly seen hope, because I do think a big thing with BPD is hope. So many people are like, you're just going to be stuck with this forever. There's nothing you can do about it. You guys are, unrealistic, crazy, promiscuous, stealing can be a big thing. There's so many things that just don't make sense that BPD people do and, or can do, and I've just always had to tell myself, there are things out there where we're not alone. I have to remind myself this is based on things that have happened to me, not something I was born with. People aren't born with BPD. It is based on the brain having to disassociate. So, I'm a big proponent of, there's so many free services. I mean, you've got, if you were to get a hold of women of sexual violence, there's all kinds of support groups that you can use. And a lot of these online Zoom ones, you don't have to be in person. You can shut off your camera so no one has to see you. But I think, being able to talk about it there's a freedom instead of stuffing it all in, because I think, like you said, it can get into a very dark place, especially a lot of people with BPD have intrusive thoughts. So it can be something like run your car into the wall, and that was something when I was younger, I could not understand. So cutting, in and out of, inpatient hospitals was really big in the beginning, drinking and blacking out and just not knowing where I was, that was a big thing. And not a lot of people want to take the time for the medication. And so for me, they do things like the propranolol and lamotrigine. These are bigger ones that, for BPD that they've been able to find, but I've talked to a lot of people in recovery where BPD is one of those that does get worse under the effects of drugs and alcohol. BPD is one of those where sexual trauma is high, going off on people, and, anything small, at least in my experience, something small of someone putting their arm on my arm, if I've been drinking, I could get kicked out because it could just be one thing that makes me think of something else. And it could be a very innocent something, but to me, it was like you were going to hurt me. So, being on medications, not mixing, drugs and alcohol with your medications, being honest with your doctor. So, I've had family that have passed away and they have BPD, and I've had their doctor say, had that person told me that they were using drugs or drinking on it, I would have given them a whole different medication. Their whole life could have been different, but just not wanting to be honest with the doctor for fear of how you'll look, I think keeps a lot of people sick,
Right.
so I always tell people, find a doctor that you trust,
Yep.
and find, even if, like you said, it's a suicide hotline, a online support group, a social media support group, just someone where you're not alone and there's one person in life that you trust that you do not think is going to judge you. Because once somebody with, a big characteristic is just cutting people off,
Right.
so if you don't have somebody that's kind of trained or at least loves you, it's going to be very easy to make an opinion or a suggestion, and that person may not want to reach out to you again. So I think it's one of those, don't try to label somebody if you don't know about it, and buying someone a BPD self-help book is not going to do anything but make them feel that you are now aware of how inept they are.
Right.
So it's never good to go diagnose anybody. All we can say, is there anything I can do to help you? Because I see you're
Right.
struggling. I love you. And that's the type of support somebody I would suggest, and be honest with the people in your life. If you are hurt, like having, ideations and having intrusive thoughts, own it. I know it sounds silly. It was really hard for me to tell my therapist, I think about running my car into the wall. I've said it around my kid, or, like, it's really hard to own sometimes how insane the thoughts are. But the freedom is when you tell it. And I was always told, a problem shared is a problem cut in half. Once
Yeah.
I share it, the scary booginess of it, the darkness of it goes away, because I've shared it with somebody. I'm not alone anymore, to think about it. There is hope in getting out of it.
Right. So, um, I noticed when you talked about when you were triggered, when someone had touched you, and so I was thinking about that, how with the situation that is likely what turned on the disorder for you, um, that you are constantly going to be susceptible to reliving that trigger over and over and over again, even if it's at work and somebody bumps into you, that could be
Yeah.
triggering.
It
So,
makes the whole screenshot. That's one thing that would made it really hard for work. Like, I mainly work with females, because of my borderline and my PTSD, because in certain situations, at least for me, things for me are like a flip book. So if something happens and I think of something, it's like a whole flip book, when they used to make cartoons or whatever, it's a whole bunch of images in my head at once. Um,
right.
and so I have to be careful about the environments I put myself in. And for me, it's not other people's fault that this is what I live with. So that is why, like, I don't drink, because my perception is very skewed, and what is not meant to be in any way inappropriate can be taken that way, just because it is very, perception's different when you're under the influence. So I've heard with a lot of women, feeling attacked or feeling these different ways, feeling unsafe, a lot of those things can happen because you're not able to calm yourself. You can't ground yourself if you're under the influence of things, and a PTSD moment happens. And that
Yep.
does put, everybody in danger in that situation,
Right.
so yes, I do think, just owning, like you said, writing, journaling. I make a list, because dating is very hard with BPD, I mean, intimacy, anything where you have to trust people. And I think that's when you talked about, relationships, it is a big thing, because it's not, and I don't want to say easy to love, but it has its own complications, to date or be in love with someone, with BPD. And I tell people, they're not going to be the people, if you're healthy about it, that you just get in a relationship with a week or two and everything's just going to go great. It's going to be a relationship built on communication, patience, being able to talk things out, being
Right.
able to, validate each other, to be heard. I mean, that's the biggest thing I can say. If you're going to date
Right.
somebody with BPD or something, you better be able to validate somebody and give them a safe space to be, because we're
So
talking.
I was just thinking of a habit that I do, and I want to know if you have that same thing. So I've had like partners, and they're like, you're always just pushing me away all the time. Yeah, I do, because I want you to come running back. I want you to I push you to see if you're coming, if you know, I do
Yeah.
it all the time, and it's it's damaging to my partner because they think I'm rejecting them for whatever
Yeah.
reason, but I'm not. I want them to come running right back.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it's not a good thing to do, but I do it all the time.
It
And
is, and
I don't realize
that is a
like
big
that I
one.
should probably
It's a
do it.
it's a big one because of the fact, um, a big common trait is that they say, "Let me throw everything at you real quick and see if you'll stay." And so I read a book and it says, "I hate you, don't leave me." And so it's
Yep.
one of those things, I hate you, but I want you to come back to me. So I've been told a lot, dating in my divorce and stuff, that I'm just too much, and that is a
Yep.
very big
That's
characteristic
the
of
key
just
phrase that
overwhelming
describes
people.
us.
Yeah. And so I tell people, I I cannot test everybody, and that's a big thing with people with BPD, is I'm going to test to see if you love me. So if I push you away, will you show that I'm worthy by coming back? And what I have
Yep.
found over the years is, they'll say nothing I do is good enough for you. And that's a big one that I've had with failure in relationships, is people feel that there's nothing they can do that is good enough for what I think, because it's just how I am. Nothing ever meets my expectations. If I order a meal, I thought it was going to taste better. If I, it's just, I have this some idea in my mind that's just unattainable. And until I can learn contentment and learn to just be okay with the uncomfortable, you know, I've really had to learn that things in my mind aren't always going to feel comfortable. My body, sometimes in situations, I'm going to feel that I am not comfortable. I do not want to be there. You know,
Right.
today I know that I am an adult and sometimes I have to sit there even when I don't want to. And because you tell me that I have to do it, I really don't want to do it, because I want to prove that I don't have to do that. But I'm learning that that's highly immature. And so, but I have to fight it all the time. Like I vape, it'll say, don't vape in here. I will go into that bathroom and just fight myself not to vape in that bathroom, because in my mind, if you tell me I can't do it, I really, really want to do it. And that is something I think I'll always struggle with. There's no medication to make me, not want to do things that I'm told I can't do. That's just me telling myself I have to be a rule following citizen. And if it says do not do this, there's a reason. But impulsivity is really, it's really hard. And I hope that your, platform helps other people, because it's a big stigma that I think a lot of people don't understand the good things about it too. And all relationships are hard, but navigating with BPD can be a little bit more tougher because of some of, like you said, how we display things with abandonment or aggression, or sometimes failure to see the truth and telling the truth, can be a thing. And I think a lot of that's that people pleasing. Like, if I tell you, you may not like me and you may leave me. So I don't think I'm going to tell you, because my fear is that you're going to leave me anyways. And you're just waiting for the one thing that I'm going to say that's going to make you run. So, it's almost like living a Jekyll and Hyde, I can go and be 10 different people in 10 different places. If you tell me what you want me to be, I can pretty much do that. And that's because, it's easy for me to be a chameleon if I need to be. And that's the manipulation aspect of BPD, that we tend to want to be whoever anybody wants us to be. So we don't have a good idea of self.
So I want to add to that. So that's exactly, basically, without getting into too many details, that's pretty much exactly how my marriage ended. I was trying to please her so much that I told her the truth about something, which wasn't really that big of a deal, but I could see that she doubted it. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to feed her another truth. And then I'm just going to ride that truth. I'm going to be that truth because I don't want to disappoint her. And it ended up being the wrong decision. Like I should have just been truthful from the get go, which I was, but then I saw her disappointment. And so I changed to a different truth.
Yeah.
And
just be willing to work through
it wasn't
stuff.
like yeah.
So
I
mean,
it was an error for sure.
Well, and we don't know technically how to, deal with those things. Like in my, marriage, because I had so much issues with BPD, it got to the point where it did really affect, it can affect your sexual life and things like that, to the point where he started drugging me and assaulting me in my sleep because I couldn't have a healthy sex life. So addressing these things, and having partners who are open to what's going on, where you can be yourself, and you've got to trust the people you let in your life, because when you're married, like, they may help you with medications, they may help you with things. You have to trust those who you allow in your life, and keep your eyes open for the people that, want to come in and swoop in and say, I'm going to take care of you, because I think BPD people, because they have so much self-doubt, can be very big praise to somebody that can be gaslighted, can be to the point where by the end of my marriage, they thought I had MS because I could not stand. I could not, count backwards. I could not remember what I ate, what I did yesterday, because it's easy to make people feel sick. And it's easy if you trust people, and I think a lot of people with BPD, they just want someone to trust. And so, when you love somebody with BPD, or you're trying to figure out how to be healthy while you have it, is learning that you can trust yourself more than anybody and trust your gut, not sometimes my brain can fool me, but my gut usually tells me, I have good instincts.
Right.
I think a lot of us do. We can read the room. And if you're healthy about it, it can kind of save you from a lot, and that we can come back from anything, because some people will use it to prey on you. It's, we're easy prey because we're a little unstable ourselves. So it's easy to make excuses for other people. When you were like, please don't leave me, you're willing to put up with more. So yeah.
Right.
I shared more than what I
Jen.
wanted
Well, I think
so you can edit out.
Good. No, you are great. And I already kind of figured that this was going to probably be a several segment, because this is a complicated situation. So I had already said, you know what, this is probably going to take me 2 or 3 sessions to get through all of the information that we're going to need to cover. But I think we provided people with a lot of information that hopefully, if it's interesting to you, go rewatch it, because you're going to miss something. Because I can tell you right now, I'm going to have to go back and watch it about 3 or 4 times to really go, okay, what did I know I missed something in here. And so
and
I want to thank you for coming on, Jen. Go ahead.
Oh, I just said it's sometimes, even with BPD, it's a hard time focusing. So I can jump from a lot of different things too. So to your viewers, I'm sorry, some of it, gets on tangents, but it is part of, what my brain does. So.
Right. Well, I think it was a great episode. I'm very happy with the content, and you provided a lot of good information. So I highly, highly appreciate it, and I would love to have you come back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I'm glad I could help. So thank you for what you do. I
All right.
think it's important. The dialogue creates change. So, if I can help in any way, just let people know you're great just the way you are. And you don't have to change for anybody.
That's right.
Just love yourself
Nope.
and, try to get help with what you want to change for yourself. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And that is going to be it for the show. So we're probably going to jump right back into this next Monday, and
All right.
we'll try to get Jen back on, and
Absolutely.
we'll keep going at it.
All right. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.